Last summer, I took a job as a park ranger at Cedar Grove National Park. I was 32 and thought it might help me find some peace after my divorce. I loved nature and figured the park would let me reconnect with that part of myself. The trails were beautiful, and at first, I felt like I could breathe again. But I never stopped thinking about what happened next. One quiet evening, I went to close the visitor center. The sun was setting behind the trees, and I grabbed my flashlight. The trails were empty, and a strange stillness filled the air. When I reached Trail 4, I saw something odd on the ground: a pile of abandoned hiking gear. A torn backpack, a water bottle, and a pair of hiking boots were scattered there. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I felt uneasy. Maybe it was just a careless hiker, I thought, but something felt wrong. As I inspected the area, I noticed a dark stain on a rock nearby. I hesitated but then leaned closer. My heart raced when I realized it was blood, dried in strange patterns. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly left the area and went back to the visitor center. I just hoped it was all in my head. In the days that followed, whispers spread around the park. Hikers talked about disappearances. I learned that more than a few people had gone missing recently. I started to find torn clothing along the trails. One piece had a strange symbol carved into a nearby tree. I felt a cold sweat on my back as fear crept in. I couldn't understand why, but something wasn't right. The other rangers were acting strange, too. They wouldn't look me in the eye when I asked about the missing hikers. Their eyes darted away, filled with fear. I wanted to shake them and demand answers, but I didn't have the courage. I felt isolated. No one wanted to talk about what lurked among the trees. Then one evening, while I walked the trails with my flashlight, I heard something behind me. It was a rustle, maybe a footstep. I turned quickly, but there was nothing. Just darkness and the light of my flashlight cutting through the mist. My heart raced. I was truly scared now. Every creak in the branches sent chills down my spine. I told myself to stay focused. Then I saw a figure in the distance. It stood still, barely visible. I took a step closer and called out, but it didn't move. My breath caught in my throat. Who was it? Why were they out here? I didn't even move closer. I just stood there, shivering in the stillness. I felt like I was on the edge of a nightmare. Then they turned slowly to face me. The light caught their eyes and I froze. Nobody was there. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. The sense of dread wrapped around me like a thick fog. I blinked, hoping to clear my vision, but the figure remained absent. How could something that was there a moment ago just vanish? I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I took a deep breath and scanned the darkness. There had to be an explanation. Perhaps it was just my fear conjuring images out of the shadows. But then, a faint whisper reached my ears, almost like a voice carried by the wind. It sent a jolt of panic through me. I strained to hear, but the words were lost in the rustling leaves that I had to leave Trail 4. I turned and hurried back the way I came. I tried to shake off the feeling that something was following me. The branches overhead creaked, and I could swear I saw movement in the corner of my eye. Every step felt heavier. I finally reached the visitor center. Slamming the door behind me like that would keep whatever haunted the trail outside, and I leaned against the door, trying to calm my racing pulse. The visitor center felt safe, but I couldn't ignore the weight of what I had seen or hadn't. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me back to reality. It was a message from one of the rangers. Simply read, "We need to talk. Meet me by the old cabin at midnight." I frowned. Why would he want to meet so late? I needed answers about the disappearances, about what I'd encountered, but a knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. Going back out there meant facing the darkness again. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, I tried to prepare myself. I considered calling someone, but who could I trust? I'd been alone in this. More whispers echoed in my mind about what had happened to those who vanished. I made my way to the old cabin, a place long rumored to be haunted. The moonlight filtered through the trees, creating eerie patterns on the ground. Each snap of a twig made me jump. I felt every eye of the night watching me. When I arrived, the cabin loomed in front of me, its sagging structure almost skeletal against the night sky. I called out softly, "Hey, are you here?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from the shadows, I saw a figure step forward. Relief washed over me until I saw that it was Ted, one of the rangers, but there was something off about him. His face was pale, eyes wide and fearful. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered urgently. "What's going on?" I asked, anxiety bubbling. "What did you want to tell me?" Ted glanced over his shoulder. "It's not safe to talk here. We need to move." Before I could respond, he turned to flee deeper into the woods. I hesitated, but this felt too important to ignore. I followed. Then I heard it again, the faint whispering. This time it sounded like words. They felt like warnings or pleas. I didn't understand, but the urgency gripped me. I had to know what was happening, why the park was alive with fear. That S when I saw it. A glimmer in the darkness. A familiar piece of torn clothing hanging from a branch. I moved closer, and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just clothing. It had a symbol on it. One I had seen before. I realized then that the truth was far worse than I could have imagined. I stared at the piece of clothing, heart racing. The symbol burned into my memory, a triangle surrounded by a circle. It was the same symbol I'd seen on the missing person reports. A chill gripped me as a sick realization washed over me. The disappearances, the whispered warnings, they were all connected to this. "Ted," I called, desperate to catch up to him. The night felt thicker, shadows creeping in close. The whispering that had been soft and far away now turned into a cacophony of voices. I couldn't make out the words, but a sense of overwhelming dread filled the air. I picked up my pace, moving cautiously deeper into the woods. "Where are you?" I shouted again, panic edging into my voice. The trees swayed eerily, as if they were alive, and I could almost hear them creaking in response. My breath came in short gasps. I needed to find Ted. I needed answers. After what felt like hours, I stumbled through a small clearing. Moonlight broke through the branches, revealing a cluster of rocks at its center. Ted stood there, his back to me, staring into the darkness beyond. As I approached, I held my breath. I couldn't tell if he was in shock or if he was actually seeing something in the dark. "Ted, please," I pleaded, making him turn. I saw his eyes glisten, filled with a mix of fear and urgency. "What's happening? Why are people going missing?" He hesitated. "There's something out here. Something we were never meant to disturb." His voice dropped to a whisper, and I leaned closer. "There are places even the rangers avoid. This is one of them." "What do you mean?" I needed him to explain. "What does it have to do with the symbol?" His gaze darted again to the shadows. "Calls to the lost. The ones who disappear, they aren't gone. They linger here, trapped." A cold shiver traced down my spine. "Trapped? What do you mean?" I felt a sudden weight in the air, like the forest held its breath. "Look," Ted pointed, and I followed his finger into the darkness. There, barely visible in the moonlight, was another piece of clothing. More symbols littered the ground, interwoven like a warning. Then I saw it, a movement from the corner of my eye. I turned sharply. Nothing but trees and shadows. But it felt like something was watching us. The whispering grew louder, almost deafening. Ted grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "We need to leave. Now." But before I could respond, the ground beneath us shifted. A low rumble echoed, and the trees shook. I stumbled as the atmosphere changed, thick with a palpable energy. "Run!" Ted shouted, yanking me forward. I didn't need to be told twice. We sprinted back toward the path, heart pounding as the whispers transformed into shrieks. Something was angry. I glanced over my shoulder, my blood running cold. A dark shape emerged from the trees, looming larger than life. "It's coming!" I yelled. The branches echoed our desperation as we dashed through the underbrush, fear propelling us forward. I had to know what was behind all this. As we burst back onto the trail, I realized there was no turning back. The truth I sought was more dangerous than I ever expected. The trees closed in around us as we raced down the path. Ted was ahead, but I could barely keep up. My lungs burned with each frantic breath. The cold air felt like it was clawing at my throat, and the whispers were relentless, echoing my worst fears. "Keep running," Ted gasped, glancing back just once before turning his focus ahead. "We have to get to the ranger station." Just as we rounded a bend, the soil gave way beneath my feet. I stumbled and fell hard, the ground biting into my palms. I looked up, panic surging as I saw Ted freeze a few feet ahead. "Ted, go!" I yelled, trying to get back on my feet. He hesitated, torn between helping me and fleeing. But I could see the terror in his eyes. "I can't leave you," he shouted, bravely stepping toward me. "No, just go," I insisted. The shape behind him loomed larger, shadows twisting unnaturally. Something was closing in, and I could almost feel its breath on my skin. With a final glance, he took off down the path, calling for me to follow. The sounds around me intensified, the whispers morphing into anguished cries. I scrambled up, grateful to reclaim my footing. My mind was racing. What had we found in that clearing? What was chasing us? I sprinted to catch up, but just as I reached the main trail, a sudden force struck me off balance. I stumbled through a thick fog that had rolled in without warning. For a moment, the world around me vanished, consumed by a swirling gray. "Ted?" I called out, my voice shaking. There was no response, only the haunting echoes of my own words. My heart raced in fear. I couldn't see in any direction. The fog was a barrier. Panic surged as I staggered forward, hoping to break free of it. Then everything went still. The cacophony faded to silence, and I realized I was utterly alone. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding loudly in my ears, trying to calm myself. "Focus," I muttered. I needed to think. I needed Ted.as. If in answer, I heard something. A faint rustling, like branches being moved, broke through the stillness. It was coming from my left. I edged closer, straining to see through the haze. A shadow shifted, and I felt a chill race down my spine. "Who's there?" I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer came, but the shape moved again, closer this time. My instincts screamed at me to run, but curiosity tethered me to the spot. I had to find out what it was. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the fog. It was small but weathered. A woman with wild hair and hollow eyes stared back at me, fear etched deep into her features. "You shouldn't be here," she rasped, her voice like gravel. "You've disturbed the woods." "Where's Ted?" I asked desperately. "What do you mean? What happened to the others? Why are people disappearing?" Her gaze shifted, looking over my shoulder as if sensing something lurking behind me. "They're watching. The ones who are lost." She paused, her breath hitching. "They will take you too." Before I could process her words, the fog began to swirl violently. Panic surged again, and I prepared to run. But then I heard a heavy thud behind me, a presence shifting through the mist. I turned slowly, breathing heavily, knowing that whatever was coming was worse than the unknown. I had found something terrifying among the trails, and now it was hunting me. I turned back to the woman, desperation clawing at my throat. "What do you mean they'll take me?" I asked, my voice trembling. But she had already started to fade into the mist, her image blurring like a memory slipping away. Just before she vanished, she whispered, "Find the light." I stood frozen, heart racing as I processed her words. I glanced back towards where I thought I'd seen the shadow. The thudding sounds grew louder, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Whatever was out there was closing in. The air thickened, pressing down as panic surged through me. The fog lifted momentarily, revealing jagged branches that looked like grasping fingers. Then it descended again, wrapping around me like a shroud. I turned away from the darkness, intent on finding the path again. My breath came fast. I had to move. "Ted," I shouted, hoping somehow my voice would reach him. I stumbled through the fog, trying to find any sign of the ranger station. Felt so far away, lost in a sea of gray. My legs ached, but I pressed on, urgency driving me. Another thud erupted from behind me, followed by a rasping breath that sent chills down my spine. I risked a glance back and caught a glimpse of a grotesque figure emerging from the fog. Its skeletal form twisted unnaturally, limbs contorted like some horrific parody of humanity. Panic overtook me, and without thinking, I bolted deeper into the dense woods. The trees closed in again, and I fought the urge to scream. Branches clawed at my clothes, pulling at me as I ran. I could feel the creature's south presence lurking close behind, every thud of its footsteps echoing in my mind. Find the light, I repeated to myself like a mantra. Just as hope began to fade, I saw something ahead, a flicker of brightness. I pushed through the fog, heart pounding with renewed determination. The light was growing stronger, shining like a beacon among the chaos. I focused on it, ignoring the shadows that swirled at the edges of my vision as I reached the source. I found an old lantern perched on a moss-covered stone. It wasn't lit, but the light emanating from it pulsed gently, illuminating my surroundings in warm hues. I grasped the lantern tightly, feeling a surge of hope. I could hear the creature moving ever closer, its breath rattling like dry leaves. The woman's final warning echoed in my mind. If I was going to survive, I needed to make this lantern work. I rummaged through my pockets, heart racing as I searched for anything to ignite it. Suddenly, I spotted a small box of matches I'd stashed earlier. My hands shook as I struck a match, its flame flickering weakly against the encroaching darkness. I held it to the lantern, praying it would take. Then came a sickening realization. The fog thickened as if to smother my hope. It was too dark. I needed to hurry. Just as the flame caught on the wick, the creature let out a guttural growl behind me. I turned just in time to see its twisted form lurching closer. Everything went silent again, save for my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Would the light be enough to save me? Or was I about to discover just how close I was to joining the other lost souls? The lantern flared to life, casting a warm glow in the darkness that enveloped me. As its light spread, I felt an immediate sense of relief wash over me. The creature paused, caught off guard by the sudden illumination. I could see its twisted features more clearly. Hollow eyes, sharp teeth, and a mouth that hung open as if perpetually gasping for breath. I brandished the lantern, holding it out like a shield. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice stronger than I felt. The creature hesitated, but only for a moment. Then, it lunged, propelled by a frightening speed that left me barely able to react. I stumbled back, nearly losing my grip on the lantern. As the creature dimmed its advance in the face of the light, I suddenly understood the woman's instruction. The glow was my only lifeline. With that thought, I moved forward, using the lantern to push back against the encroaching darkness. "This way," I called, hoping my words would somehow guide Ted back to me. I took a step, then another, scanning the dense fog for any signs of my friend. The oppressive silence around me was a stark reminder of how alone I truly was. The only sound was the faint crackling of the lantern's flame and my ragged breaths. The creature lingered at the edge of the light, its form yanking against the luminosity like it was tethered. I took another step forward, my courage swelling as I felt the warmth envelop me. I could hear the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze, a sound I had taken for granted in the past, now a sign that nature still existed. But the relief was short-lived. A sudden gust of cold wind blew through, snuffing out the lantern's flame. Darkness rushed in, swallowing me whole. I gasped, trying to recover as dread washed over me like ice water. I fumbled for the matches, but my fingers were trembling so violently I could hardly manage to grip them. The guttural growl of the creature filled the silence. I could sense its presence creeping closer, the air growing heavier with each passing second. Panic surged as I finally struck a match, praying for a spark in the suffocating blackness. Then I saw it. The flicker illuminated the space around me, just enough to see the creature's eyes, glowing like twin coals, predatory and hungry. In that moment, I knew I had to act fast. I held the match to the wick, my heart racing as I saw the tiny flame catch. Light burst forth again, briefly creating a stark contrast against the oppressive dark. The creature hesitated once more, unable to cross the boundary of illumination. "Ted," I cried out, voice echoing in the clearing. I turned to look for my friend. My eyes scanned the fog, trying to catch any sign of him. That S when I noticed something odd in the distance, a flash of red. I squinted, making out the shape of his jacket before the mist swirled, obscuring it again. Hope surged within me, but before I could call out a second time, the creature lunged once more, knocking the lantern from my hands. The light tumbled into the foliage, extinguishing as it hit the ground. The darkness swallowed me again, leaving me utterly vulnerable. "Stay back," I yelled into the void, my voice tinged with desperation. Silence fell, and I felt the weight of dread growing heavier than ever. I didn't know how much time I had left. I needed to find Ted, and fast. Just then, I heard a faint whisper cutting through the stillness. Help! It was barely audible, but I recognized it. Ted. He was close that I took a deep breath, ready to plunge into the unknown again. I just hoped the creature didn't get to him first. I stepped into the inky darkness, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But Ted needed me, and I wouldn't leave him behind. I strained my ears, desperately trying to locate the direction of his voice. "Ted," I called again, softer this time. The fog thickened around me, wrapping me like a foggy cocoon. I could barely see my hands in front of me. I felt my pulse quicken, the adrenaline coursing through me, battling my rising fear. The whisper came again. Help! It was clearer now, a plea filled with urgency. My heart pounded as I edged further into the unknown, each step careful as I tried not to make any sudden movements that could attract the creature. Then, just as I rounded a tree, I tripped over a root and fell hard onto the ground. My hands scraped against gravel and dirt, but I barely registered the pain. I scrambled to my feet, cursing silently. "Ted," I shouted, panicking at the thought of losing him. But I also had to stay alert. The creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to slip up. Suddenly, a rustling noise came from behind me. I whipped around, my breath catching in my throat. There was nothing, not even a shadow. I shook my head, trying to clear it. I couldn't let paranoia consume me. I had to focus. That S when I noticed something glinting through the haze. My heart raced. It looked like metal, reflecting a sliver of light that wasn't there. I stepped closer, squinting to see what it was. It was a flashlight. It had to be Ted's. I snatched it up, relief flooding through me. I clicked the switch, and a beam of light cut through the fog, slicing a path ahead. I felt more secure now, more empowered. "Ted," I shouted again, this time with more conviction. I scanned my surroundings, the beam dancing along the trees. "Where are you?" Nothing but silence, but I didn't give up. I moved toward the last place I'd heard that quiet cry. My hands gripped the flashlight tight as I stepped through the swirling mist. I felt the air shift behind me. A chill ran down my spine. I turned slowly, and there it was, the creature, more menacing than before, eyes aglow in the darkness. Its jagged teeth bared in a vicious snarl that I pointed the flashlight directly at it, hands shaking from fright. "Stay back," I shouted, but my voice quivered, betraying my fear. The creature paused, just at the edge of the light, its head tilting curiously. It seemed to understand the boundary I had created, but it was likely waiting for the right moment to strike. My mind raced. I had to keep it at bay and find Ted. Then another thought struck me. What if it's hunting him? I glanced around, trying to sense where Ted might be while keeping the creature in sight. The glow of my flashlight felt feeble against the monster's looming presence, but I couldn't let it falter. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a crack of a branch. My heart skipped a beat. "Ted," I yelled, and before I could think, I sprinted toward the sound, leaving the creature momentarily behind. But then everything went dark again. The flashlight flickered, and just as quickly as it faded, that gut-wrenching growl pierced through the mist. The realization hit me. The creature was not just hunting, it was playing. As I scrambled to turn the light back on, dread closed in around me. My hands were slick with sweat as I frantically clicked the switch. I could barely see. I felt a rush of air past my cheek. That S when I noticed something else. the shape of another figure appearing just beyond the trees, face pale and eyes wide. It wasn't just darkness that surrounded me anymore. It felt like an imminent confrontation was at hand. But I couldn't tell if it was Ted or something far worse. I squinted into the thick fog, my heart racing, trying to make sense of the figure emerging from the shadows. It didn't move. My pulse pounded in my ears as I willed the darkness to reveal the shape before me. "Ted?" I called, holding the flashlight like a lifeline. The beam trembled in my hand. The figure remained still, and dread settled heavily in my stomach. I stepped closer, straining to see. "Please help." The voice was familiar but faint. It sent a jolt through me. It was definitely Ted. But something was wrong. "Ted, where are you?" I demanded, stepping closer, my fear morphing into urgency. Suddenly, the figure flinched, and I realized it wasn't moving toward me. It was backing away. "Don't!" I shouted, but it was too late. The creature had shifted, closing the distance between us in the blink of an eye. It lunged forward, its growl echoing like a death knell, and I instinctively raised the flashlight. The beam struck its eyes, illuminating its twisted features for just a moment. My stomach turned at the sight, sharp teeth, matted fur, and an intensity in its gaze that felt predatory. It snarled, inches from my face, and I stumbled back, losing my footing. The flashlight flickered again, and darkness engulfed me once more. My heart hammered as I faced the void, searching for any sign that the creature hadn't followed me. "Ted," I called, but my voice sounded thin against the suffocating silence. Then, a frantic rustle broke through. "Over here." That voice again. It came from somewhere to my left, barely audible over the low growl of the creature still lingering nearby. Gathering my courage, I forced myself to scurry toward the sound. With every step, I felt the weight of doubt crushing my resolve. What was happening to Ted? Why didn't he just run? "Ted!" I yelled again, desperation creeping into my tone. "I'm coming." The trees closed in around me, the fog wrapping tighter. I stumbled over roots and branches, my heart racing. The creature's south presence felt too close. Every moment in that darkness was like an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, the beam flickered back to life. I gasped, momentarily relieved, but the light felt dim, fragile. "Ted," I called out. There was no response, just the sound of my own breathing, loud and panicked. I hesitated, caught between moving forward and staring into the now hostile dark. When I spotted movement. A shadow shifted in the light ahead, and I froze. It was clear now I wasn't alone. Another figure, smaller, crouched near the base of a tree, trembling. Panic exploded in my chest. It wasn't Ted, but a boy no older than 10, wide-eyed with terror. "Get away!" I shouted, directing my light at him. "Run!" But as I turned, the creature emerged fully from the shadows just behind me. Its growl shook the air, and in that split second, I realized I'd just placed myself between two predators. The boy's expression turned to horror as I stood there, the flashlight waning, and time froze. Then everything shifted. The ground beneath us shook as a horrifying roar erupted from the creature's throat. I needed a plan, and fast. My mind raced through options, but they all seemed futile against the magnitude of this nightmare. I didn't have time to think. The roar echoed in my ears, drowning out any rational thought. I had to protect the boy. "Run!" I yelled again, hoping he understood. My legs felt heavy, but the boy stood rigid, paralyzed by fear. The creature advanced, its breath hot and foul, and I instinctively took a step back, my back hitting the rough bark of the tree behind me. The flashlight glimmered feebly, but I couldn't let it die completely. I pressed the button harder, pouring everything I had into that beam of light. "Please!" I shouted, desperate. "Help me!" That seemed to jolt the boy awake. He broke into a sprint away from the creature, eyes wide and tears streaming down his cheeks. I didn't know where he was headed, but it didn't matter as long as he was moving. The growl grew louder, a deep rumble promising chaos. I focused on the creature, knowing I had mere seconds. It was huge, towering over me with hungry eyes. Stay back. I yelled, raising the flashlight like a weapon. But deep down, I knew it was a flimsy shield against something so primal. And then I noticed something else in the periphery of my vision. Movement. The trees weren't just looming, they shifted, forming a wall. Vines curled as if alive, drawing closer, almost joining the creature in this nightmarish scene. Panic bubbled up in my throat. I was trapped. Suddenly, I heard another voice, a familiar one. Don't move. Ted's voice cut through the terror, startling me momentarily. I turned just in time to see him bursting through the fog, his eyes wild. Get away from it, he shouted. But he didn't sound like Ted. He looked disheveled, clothing torn and dirty, his face smeared with mud. Something was off. Ted? I stammered, a knot of confusion tightening in my stomach. Why was he here? Why wasn't he safe? Ted, we have to go, I insisted, my voice wavering as fear clawed at my insides. But he didn't move toward me. Instead, he glared at the creature, his posture tense and unnatural. No, he yelled at me with a strange intensity. It's too late. We're meant to be here. His eyes shifted, locking onto the beast. It growled low, almost as if responding to him. My instincts screamed at me to run, to grab the boy and flee into the trees. But I couldn't leave Ted. Not like this. What do you mean? I asked, words tumbling out in confusion. What is happening? But before Ted could respond, the creature lunged toward me, snapping its jaws. I barely had time to react. I dodged to the side, and instinct kicked in as I raised the flashlight. The beam flickered bright again, illuminating the creature's deep-set eyes. That I hesitated. In that moment, I saw it something more than a mindless predator. There was a purpose in its glare, something waiting. Then, Ted stepped forward and shouted again. Now, the command echoed in the clearing, clear and commanding. In that strange connection between them, I felt my heart drop. Ted wasn't himself, and whatever was happening had only just begun. I could hardly process what was happening as the creature shifted, its focus splitting between me and Ted. The tension crackled in the air, pulling me taut like a bowstring ready to snap. All my instincts screamed to escape, to flee toward safety, but I couldn't abandon Ted. I needed to understand what was truly happening. Ted, listen to me, I shouted, desperation tinging my voice. I stepped back, keeping the flashlight trained on the creature, aware I was leaving myself exposed to whatever darkness clung to the edges of the clearing. You need to fight it. This isn't you. But he stood there, eyes filled with a mixture of yearning and something darker. His lips formed a ghost of a smile. It's just a bigger piece of us, he said, his voice low and otherworldly. It's part of the land, a guardian or a trap, depending on your view. When you disturb it, it offers all this in return. It's what they want. Confusion flooded my thoughts, mingling with fear. What was he talking about? And who were they? I thought back to the woman in the fog, her warning still fresh in my mind, urging me to find the light. As Ted's words spiraled through my head, the creature shifted, muscles rippling beneath its matted fur. It seemed attuned to Ted, drawn as if it shared a language with him, a communication beyond my understanding. With every second, the shadows crept deeper, thickening around us like a living entity. I needed to act. The flashlight sputtered, a flickering reminder of fading hope. Ted, I called, willing a connection that felt so fragile yet so necessary. Fight this. We need to get away. For a moment, confusion overtook the hold he seemed to share with the creature. His eyes darted to mine, and there was a moment, just a heartbeat, where I saw a glimmer of awareness. But the creature stirred again, and Ted's gaze shifted back to it, the haunting glow overwhelming his features. The air shivered as it let out another guttural growl, my heart racing at the sound. My hand trembled around the flashlight, and I fought the fear threatening to swallow me whole. It's not too late, I yelled, this time louder, my throat raw from the intensity. We can leave this place together. But I could feel Ted slipping away. He inhaled deeply, and I felt the shadows draw closer around him, merging him with the darkness. You don't understand what this is, he managed, his tone both sorrowful and resigned. Everyone who has come here, they didn't disappear. They chose this path. This wasn't the Ted I knew. That's not true. They're trapped. We have to fight against this. I pressed, my voice carrying the weight of desperation. And then something snapped inside me. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him to whatever malevolence enshrouded the woods. I thrust the flashlight toward the creature, illuminating its grotesque form, praying it would react as it had before. "Get away from him," I shouted, my voice reverberating through the stillness. The sudden burst of light. The creature recoiled. In the fleeting moment of panic, I felt Ted waver. "No, you have to understand," he cried, extending his hands as if to keep the distance between us, even as a sense of urgency rang out in his voice. And just like that, a choice. The darkness around Ted shimmered, almost as if it was waiting for his command. In that moment, I seized the opportunity. "Fight it," I urged, my heart pounding. The creature lashed out, but I pivoted, moving farther into the light. The flashlight's beam flickered, but I pressed it toward Ted. "Remember who you are," I implored, holding the glow firm even as dread gripped my heart. "We were supposed to get through this together." Slowly, Ted's expression faltered, confusion echoing back as if he were fighting through a fog. "I can't," he whispered. The connection between them weakened as the creature surged forward again. The rich, pulsating darkness seemed almost alive, wrapping around him in a desperate, swift embrace. "Light!" I screamed again. "Please!" I could feel the ground vibrating, the air swirling around me as I lunged forward, unwilling to give into what sought to claim him. I squeezed the flashlight once more, and it flared to life, greater and more deliberate, bathing us in a warm azure glow. The nighttime creatures enveloped behind it sought to slink back, repelled by the radiance I fought for. Ted hesitated, eyes darting. But then the creature lunged, snapping its jaws dangerously close to my hand. I stumbled back, but adrenaline surged through me. "Ted, you have to break free," I urged, trusting there was still something inside that fought their allure. The air thickened, almost electrically charged, and Ted's breath turned ragged. "You don't understand it, Will," but the next words vanished under the growl of the beast, which bore down for its prey. Instinct kicked in, and I backed up, my voice steeled with resolve. "Fight it. Break away from its control." The creature hesitated again, caught in the dichotomy between its call and Ted's struggle. In that fleeting moment, I lunged, turning the flashlight's beam directly onto Ted. "Remember who you are," I pleaded once more. And then there was a glimmer. A flicker of recognition crossed his face as the shadows shifted momentarily, releasing their grip. Ted took a step back, eyes wide as he turned slightly toward the light, breaking the entity's hold. Before I could process what was happening, he lunged away from the creature and reached for me, hand outstretched. The beast snarled in anger, but the light surged, pushing against the darkness and offering Ted an escape. I grasped his hand tightly, the warmth spreading through the cold fear that had gripped us both for so long. "Let us go," I yelled, our bond reminding me with urgency that there was light amongst the shadows as we turned to sprint back toward what felt like freedom. The creature shrieked with a sound of agony, its form collapsing as we plunged back into the darkness of the woods. The sensation of the unseen pushed heavily against us, yet we moved only forward. Together as we finally broke into the safety of the clearing lit by moonlight, I quickly glanced back. The forest seemed to thrum with anger, the whispers rising as a cacophony of voices echoed from within. But we made it. The light surrounded us, warmly illuminating our escape from the horror beneath the trees. But as we steadied ourselves, there was one question lingering in my mind. Had we truly escaped, or was the forest simply waiting for us to slip away again? My heart pounded as I squeezed Ted's hand tightly. It took us both a moment to catch our breath. Yet my gut twisted with the unsettling knowledge that we could never truly leave the woods behind. I stared into the fog that trailed closely behind us, shadows dancing on the treetops, leaving many mysteries unresolved. The forest had a heartbeat that pulsed at the edges of comprehension. Maybe someday I would uncover the truth of the missing souls and the light they had lost. But for now we had survived. Yet would it be enough? Would something else begin to emerge from that darkness? I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only glimpsed the surface of what lay within Cedar Grove, and the question of its true nature lingered like a bitter taste at the back of my throat, so we left the park behind, stepping into what seemed a new chapter of life. But as I looked back one last time, a shiver ran down my spine, an echo whispering through the leaves. I still think about the people we did not find, the ones we lost, and if they are still waiting for the light to free them, a haunting reminder that some darkness never truly fades.